Hello, welcome to the forum for candidates for U.S. Congress on Town Meeting Television. I'm Taylor Dobbs. I'll introduce you to the candidates. We have Chris Erickson here, an independent, Matthew Andrews of Liberty Union Party, Mark Donka, Republican, Peter Welch, the incumbent Democrat, Jerry Trudell of the Energy Independence Party, and Randall Meyer, an independent. This forum is formatted to give everyone an equal chance to speak, so we'll ask you to keep your answers to 2 minutes. And once that time is up, I'll stop you there. And later in the hour, we'll also be taking calls from the audience. So first, I'm going to start with some questions from the news recently. We've been hearing a lot about ISIS or the Islamic State, and there's varying points of view on whether or not we should have troops on the ground there or whether we should wait for a larger coalition. Right now, we're doing airstrikes. Chris Erickson, do you think airstrikes are sufficient to do away with ISIS, so to speak, or should the U.S. be doing less or more?
We shouldn't be doing airstrikes. As far as I know, Peter, United States Congress has not voted to go to war. So we have no business doing airstrikes at all.
And Matthew Andrews.
Yes, well, I would agree with that position. I think that the United States should not be engaged in airstrikes there. We've had really a lot of hype around this issue. Less than a month ago, the intelligence community was saying that ISIS is not an immediate threat to the United States. We've had some sensational videos from them, and frankly, I think that it makes the situation worse for us to be over there dropping bombs which inevitably indiscriminately kill civilians and create a lot of animosity against the United States. The real threat over there, if ISIS poses any threat, is to our occupation, and we ought to be getting our troops out of there. We have, the embassy in Baghdad is more like a university campus. It has 5,000 of our people over there, and they ought to be brought home.
Okay, and Mark Donka.
I support the airstrikes. I believe that we have to do something over there. We have, innocent people being killed. We have genocide happening over there, and I support the airstrikes, and I think it's a good start. I do not believe it's going to be the answer. We are going to have to get some other groups involved. Some of the other countries that are over there in the Middle East have to get some skin in the game, so to speak, so that they're involved. Is it going to end up with troops on the ground? The intelligence people have already told, and the defense people have already told the president that it's going to take boots on the ground to do something. Is it going to be, U.S. boots? I would hope not, but I would guess at the end game we're probably going to be over there and be involved with it.
And quickly, yes or no, is ISIS currently a threat to the U.S. in your mind?
I believe so. They've already said that they would like to destroy us. So I think we can either fight them over there or we can, fight them in our backyard.
And Peter Welch.
Well, two things. One, I want to agree with Chris. If there's going to be a sustained air campaign or military campaign, then that really does require a vote, yes or no, from Congress. People are entitled to know where each of the members of Congress stand, so I do believe that if the president's intention is a sustained aerial campaign, then he should come to Congress under the War Powers Act and seek authorization. Number two, on ISIS, this is a brutal organization. All right, the collective revulsion all of us experienced with those beheadings of innocent people. Americans really captured our attention, but they're doing this to people in the region. They're horrible. They're not a direct and immediate threat to us unless there's unless two things happen. One, there's a safe haven from which they try to launch or conceive plots against us. Or two, jihadists who go from Europe or from the United States with passports try to come back. So I do believe there's a legitimate reason for us to try to deny them a safe haven, and also Homeland Security efforts to keep out jihadists. But I voted against this notion of arming and training the Syrian rebels because I didn't think there's any realistic probability that that would be successful. The underlying conflict here with ISIS, as with al-Qaeda, as with al-Nusra, is really the Sunni-Shia conflict that has been going on for centuries and has been unleashed now with the toppling of some despots in the region. And bottom line here is that for the future of that region, the people in that region are going to have to make decisions themselves about what kind of society they want. There's enormous potential for this to spill over into the region and cause trouble. That's why I think we should be working with our allies like Turkey, like Jordan, even with Saudi Arabia, But this is an issue that reflects the Sunni-Shia conflict that's been going on for centuries, and it's not the American military or taxpayer that's going to be able to resolve this.
And quickly, yes or no, would you vote for U.S. boots on the ground?
I would not.
Thank you. And Jerry Trudell on ISIS.
You're right that this is a historical problem that we should not be in the middle of. The reason we are is the real reason we are is because, first of all, Truman said we could not afford to be the world's policeman, but that's the role we have with over 800 military bases and $700 billion yearly spent, and that's just what Congress appropriates for the Pentagon, by the way. We should not be in the middle of this, and the reason we are is because of oil. And the reason we're there is because the oil oligarchy is running this country, and you are all patsies to that. What we need to do is to jumpstart the energy revolution, liberate ourselves from foreign and undependable oil sources, and stop this carnage that we're in the middle of, where we are losing tens of thousands of killed and injured in the name of terrorism. I think it's ludicrous, the notion that this is a good thing, that we're losing thousands of people because of terror, much more than the actual terrorists are killing, we're losing. This really makes me mad. I guess I'm becoming somewhat inarticulate, but let me refocus. We should not be the world's policeman. No, we should not conduct warfare, and we should not bomb. It's a short-term Mexican medicine solution. Okay, what we need to do is what President Kennedy said we should do. We should develop a long-term understanding and cooperation between people and between nations to solve our problems collectively. And in the meantime, we need to defend our borders. But the last time our borders were threatened was 1812. There's a bunch of malarkey that's been drummed up about the need to defend our country from terrorism, and it's a bunch of bull. It's a bunch of bull. If you look at the statistics, you'll see for yourself that we've lost 100 times as many people, 1,000 times as many people in the name of fighting terrorism, sending our poor boys and girls, men and women to war. Excuse my political incorrectness. But no, I do not support airstrikes or any continued involvement in the Mideast. I do support jump-starting the energy revolution and jump-starting the economy for prosperity for all. Look at my website, Jerry Trudell for Congress, and read all about it.
Okay, and Randall Meyer, do you think we should be conducting a military campaign against ISIS, and should we have boots on the ground as part of that?
Certainly not boots on the ground. Arguably, you could say that the heavy artillery that was, you know, and the bigger pieces of equipment that were meant for the Iraqis, we have some responsibility perhaps to get rid of those in whatever way we can, but I don't believe we should be putting too much on the line to affect that end. If it can be done safely, we should do it safely. But we should not be involved in the region. We shouldn't have got involved in the region in the first place, and it's a sort of a pottery barn rules foreign policy, which is just not a good idea all around. We need to be talking instead of talking about a project for the new American century, we should be talking about a project for a new humane millennium. Okay, American empire may have been, you know, the goal of the founding fathers, or some of them, at least manifest destiny. But I think a lot of what we miss about history is it's not so much about the founding fathers. It's about the little people. And Howard Zinn, if you read Howard Zinn, he will tell you the heroes in American history are the small ones. You know, the guys like John Brown that people forget to mention. And that's what we need to be emphasizing in our foreign policy. It's sort of a small, more humane attitude.
Okay, and we have a caller on the line.
Great. Someone's watching.
Hello, caller. What's your question?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I got to get you under control. It's getting really raucous out here in listener land, and we really don't know what anybody is saying. My question is directed to all of the candidates. The only one that really has a record to defend as a candidate is Representative Welch, so it kind of gets directed towards him, but all the other candidates. About 3 or 4 years ago, Representative Welch voted on an issue, and then after the issue was over, he made a comment on the Mark Johnson show that had he basically been watching the scoreboard in the House of Representatives, he would have probably voted differently. I would expect a promise from all of the candidates. You vote what you think. You do not watch the scoreboard. You do not let that dictate what you vote. And I'm sure Representative Welch knows what that particular issue was, and I welcome him to address that in his response, as well as the other candidates addressing the question in their response. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I'd be glad to. Number one, I completely reject that characterization. But what that issue was about whether the United States of America was going to default on making its payment on its obligations, on its debt. And the Republicans in Congress, they did something that is astonishing to me. They were willing to default on our debt unless they got their way on repealing the health care bill. And I took the lead in the Democratic caucus saying, look, Americans pay their bills. Vermonters pay their bills. Could you imagine not paying your mortgage because you got irritated with your neighbor or your banker? That would never happen. And if it did happen, it would be absolutely catastrophic. It would cause enormous harm to Main Street, to small businesses, and to families, because we would destroy the credit rating of the United States. And what I made very clear was that I was absolutely insistent that we pay our bills. And what Mark Johnson asked me is if we were going to go into a cataclysm because these guys were going over and my vote would make the difference between the well-being of the United States and Main Street everyday Americans, would that be a factor that you'd have to take into account? Well, you would. That's not a conscience issue. That's a practical concern about whether you're going to do something that's going to have an enormously negative impact on families and on the reputation of this country. So that was the vote. Those are the kind of challenges you sometimes face, any of us would face, if we had to make a real-world decision in Congress. So I'm very proud of the way I handled that. I was the leader on saying America pays its bills and we don't play games with the full faith and credit of the United States.
And we'll go back to Matthew Andrews on this. As these issues pan out in Congress, often things are very close and people are encouraged to vote along party lines. You're running in the Liberty Union Party, which does not have a lot of representation in Congress. But who would you caucus with, and would you kind of toe that line, or could you be convinced to vote with people that you traditionally don't agree with?
No, I would not caucus with the Democrats. We're an independent political party. I believe that there's value in being in the House of Representatives, even as an independent individual, to be a watchdog and see how these games are played, and oftentimes when you only have two parties, things get spun, and you hear one side and the other, and neither side's giving you a straight answer, and so it's important to have those independent voices. And just to speak to the issue that the caller raised, I think that a lot of the voting is posturing, and it appears that sometimes you want something to pass, and it appears like the vote is close, but you never quite make it. And I think that's part of the game of keeping hope alive when you see all these bills that get churned through the process but never actually come up to a vote. If they do, there is a lot of game playing, and I would be there as a moral conscience for the nation.
And Mark Donka, in Congress right now, a lot of the Republican Party, both in the leadership and not, have been very well whipped in the sense that they always vote along party lines, and there's a lot, not as much crossing the aisle as some Americans would like, and this is happening on both sides, but since you're a Republican, would you work in a bipartisan way, or if you were in a Republican majority Congress, would you feel as though that was the mandate and you could simply vote on party lines?
No, I think the way you have to vote is you have to vote the will of the people that send you to Washington. They're your bosses. They're the ones that you should be voting. Yes, I am a Republican. I do believe in voting. A lot of the things that the Republicans voted on, I probably would have voted on. But Congressman Welch mentioned, though, about the health care issue where he said we wanted to repeal it. That's not totally true. When that came to a vote, they weren't talking about repealing the whole health care. They were talking about repealing a very small part of the health care. And then it ended up, that we were shutting down the country because of it. I think if we could have negotiated a little bit more on that situation, we wouldn't have run into the problem we ran into, where we did shut down the country, basically. But I blame both parties for that, because I think both parties did not go to the table and, negotiate properly. It's a give and take no matter what. No matter who has control of the House or the Senate or whatever, it's give and take. We've lost that right now. Nobody wants to give up anything. And I would go to Washington with the idea that we have to negotiate.
Okay. And Jerry Trudell, how do you identify, I mean, there's, as far as I am aware, not an energy independence caucus in Congress. Would you caucus with one party or the other? And
not one or the other, but perhaps both. I would work with anyone who's worth working with at face value, meaning they have integrity and they have good intentions. I would vote my conscience, and I would be accountable to the people. I don't agree with the way the Republicans and the Republicrats are running the show now. I would say Peter Welch is good, but he's not good enough. That's why I'm running. If you look at his website, you will not see one specific proposal to jumpstart the economy except a tax, an internet sales tax. If you look at my website, you'll see the 1% solution, which is a transaction tax on Wall Street designed to generate what we need to rebuild the poorest rich country in the world, thanks to the Republicans and the Republicrats, I might add, which is a $3 trillion investment to rebuild our infrastructure and to jumpstart the energy economy and to once and for all liberate ourselves from this Mideast morass that both of you are keeping us in the middle of, which is a lose-lose. It is a lose-lose. Did that answer your question? Do I have any more time? Go to my website, jerrytrudellforcongress.com. Read about the transaction tax, the 1% solution. Go to Peter Welch's website and read about the tax on internet sales. I would like to say this. Don't you think that if, all the lip service we're paying that I'm hearing to a lighter footprint, that it encourages people to have a lighter footprint by shopping online? Doesn't it? Therefore, logically, we would want to do the opposite of what we're doing. We would want to be less taxes online so people would shop more online. But you're proposing a so-called level playing field, which in your own words, between Vermont businesses, which are now paying that tax, and out-of-state businesses. And I think the answer is the reverse. You should not tax Vermont businesses just because they're based in Vermont, if a shopper wants to shop online and save gas money, etc. Thank you. The red flag.
Right.
Have a nice day.
And Randall Meyer, you're running as an independent. I don't know which party you identify with more, or would you caucus with Republicans or Democrats in Congress? And how would you typically like to vote? Would you listen to leadership?
I used to say that I was so far left that I was right, but I don't particularly like that metaphor anymore. I'm a scientist. It's really the best of both worlds. I mean, you take what works, and that might actually be a conservative perspective, or you pay attention closely to history and philosophy, and that might be the more conservative element of what a scientist does. But then on the other hand, they have the courage to think differently and think outside the box. So in that sense, you're liberal. Now, who I would caucus with, get down there, figure out the rules, and I'm sure, I mean, I could tell you almost hands down, 9 out of 10 times I'd vote with the Democrats. By everybody's admission, there's quite a bit of game playing down there. Now you'll see right here on my list here, I'm tired of the dog whistle politics. Supposedly only some of us hear the dog whistle, but apparently, when these people come out and say there's certain,
that's a good one.
There are certain phrases they say, and all of us are supposed to hear what we want to hear and vote accordingly.
Right.
I think
In
it was once
lockstep.
phrased as guns, gods, and gays, but there's also the abortion issue. There's coded words for racism and bigotry in our politics, and even the budget has just become another pawn in some political chessboard.
Yeah.
Here. Especially, we were speaking. Somebody used the word "end game," which is a wonderful little chess metaphor from a different century.
Thank you.
Now, I could get into talking about.
I'll vote for you.
I could get into talking about nuclear
me.
politics. I mean, the height of the Cold War. The height of America's nuclear arsenal was something like 35,000 nuclear weapons, and it's been trending downwards since I think the mid-'70s, if I remember right. And the Soviets had something like 50,000 in the mid-'80s, and we're down to 6 or 7 or 8 or 9,000. So it's down by an order of magnitude, which is good news for the world. We have to refurbish ours. Now, I was reading reading an article by the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they were talking about whether or not to refurbish the ones that we have or to build all new ones. And it looks like we're going to go with the build all new ones. And I'm kind of with that strategy because you don't want clunkers flying around in the sky. We should update the ones we have left.
Okay, and Chris Erickson, on
The
the
same
partisanship in Congress, do you feel as though you would contribute to bringing a more collaborative view to
I'm a
Congress?
woman. Vermonters have never voted to send a woman to the U.S. Congress before, and I hope they do this year. Now, as a woman, I do look at things differently from men. I see most of the budget bills as campaign finance money laundering schemes. For example, U.S. congressmen and women vote to give billions of dollars to the Pentagon. The Pentagon then gives billions to companies like Lockheed Martin, which makes the F-35 fighter jet, and then they give millions out of their billions to lobbyists. The lobbyists wine and dine the U.S. Congress people. The high-paid employees of Lockheed Martin and the other defense companies give money to political action committees who give money to the campaigns of people like Peter Welch. Weren't you in the newspaper waving a check from Lockheed Martin? You were so happy to have it. I call that campaign finance money laundering. Peter Welch votes to give Pentagon billions of dollars. The Pentagon gives billions to defense contractors like Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin literally gives millions to the lobbyists, and they give incredibly enormous